like you mean it.
Not bad, eh?
See my technique? It was perfect.
Grenade! Let's see if you can handle this! Is that all you got? Hey! Come out and play! Get him! Go, my brother!
This is Snake. I've made it to the sneaking point.
You're right on time, Snake.
For being dragged out of the sack at 2 in the morning, I did my best.
Rise and shine. Don't you love mornings?
Colonel, nobody loves being dragged away from their vacation.
I'm sorry, but we needed you. Something big is going down. Very big. That's why.
All right. So what is this important mission? I'll say it once, and only once. I am not taking out any Metal Gears.
Don't worry.
And no saving some VIP or old man.
It's nothing like that.
If it's like a hot damsel in distress, I'll think about it.
Well, it's not quite a hot damsel in distress, but it is a rescue mission.
Rescuing who?
Apes.
What?
Monkeys. But not just any monkeys.
You said monkeys?
Just listen. Your mission is to infiltrate the jungle and capture all of the monkeys.
Again. You said monkeys?
Yes, monkeys.
This isn't really my thing. If you want your monkeys, you better ask Spike or Jimmy.
Unfortunately, they weren't available.
What about me? I was on vacation.
Snake, we need you. If you don't do this, who will?
It's not like someone else couldn't handle a stealth mission.
Don't say that. This is the genre we turned over every leaf in.
Why don't you make Sam or Gabe do the job?
Snake.
Isn't this just some monkey-catching action?
Snake, I'm asking you. It's a request from the professor himself.
The professor? Natalie's grandfather?
That's the one.
The one who came up with the monkey helmet?
Well, that was the professor's classmate.
His classmate?
From high school. Not only that, but the professor is a friend of Otacon's.
He's Otacon's friend, too?
It's because of the professor that Otacon has been able to come up with some of his inventions.
All right. What are the details?
So you'll do it. Great.
I'm not against some monkey catching, but I'd rather be collecting pants.
Snake, the monkeys have fled into the jungle. When you find them, knock them out for capture.
Right. I'm not going to be able to grab them when they're jumping all around the place.
Right. When you've grabbed all the monkeys, your mission is complete.
Gotcha. Commencing Operation Ape Snake.
Snake, when you capture a monkey, yell out the password. With the password, a warp device will activate.
Understood.
Good. I'm counting on you, Snake.
Three, 2, 1, start!
Hello, this is Ed Lewis here with IGN PS2 doing a video review of Metal Gear Solid 3. And starting off the whole review, just say without a doubt, this is the best Metal Gear Solid game out there. Of the three, by far the best. When the first time you start up Metal Gear Solid 3, you're going to have an option saying like, well, I've never played these games before, my favorite is the first one, my favorite is the second one. Now actually influence the amount of codec, the amount of instructions that you get in the very beginning of the game. Now firstly, let me just delve into the storyline. This time around, everything takes place in 1964, and we have a person who looks a lot like Snake and is not quite Snake, but you'll pretty much quickly figure out, if you haven't already, just exactly who the main character in the game is. Regardless, the whole game takes place in 1964, which gives the whole thing much more of an older feel to it, kind of like early James Bond type of movies, and a lot of intrigue and a lot of like spies and everything, double agents, triple agents, which lends a whole kind of depth and complexity that Kojima loves putting in his games, but still much more of a straightforward type of affair than especially 2. And this time around, there's also much more humor. There's humor everywhere in the game, all the characters, there's much more personality in all the characters, and Revolver Ocelot becomes one of the funniest characters in the game. He has some of the best animations, some of the best character movements, and once again, the art and the graphics and everything about the game looks amazingly good. It is absolutely fantastic, and once again, a benchmark for the PlayStation 2 period. Later on in the game, we won't give any spoilers, there's also much more action, and there's huge set pieces that pretty much go on for quite a long time. And you'll see references to Indiana Jones, Star Wars, several other movies as well. If you can, basically, there's just like a movie lover's dream and a game player's dream. So just need to emphasize that this is a really good balance of both elements of game and story. Bringing the game back into 1964 brings the game into more of an analog era. Instead of, watching the cones of view in the radar in the previous game, this time around it's all about your own senses. It's all about using active sonar to actually send out a pulse to figure out where the locations of everything. Keeping in mind that animals will also give off return blips in that. So you have to really use a combination of your own sonar, anti-personnel sensor, as well as infrared, every trick you have at your disposal to make sure that you're stealthy. And this really takes the whole game into an evolution of bringing the stealth more to the forefront of the game than even it was before. A lot of the stealth also involves camouflage, which is a very easy to use system. Just basically you can have an index of 0 to 100% of how well you are currently camouflaged in the game. This is determined by what you're wearing, whether you're standing, crouching, lying prone, or whether you're moving or running. All that will factor into just how well people can see you against the rest of the environment. The other two systems in the game that are in place are the eating and the cure system. Eating is just a matter of getting food, so getting food off of enemies, or mostly just finding animals that are edible and will replenish the stamina. So here the cure system is also just healing yourself, bullet wounds, cuts, burns, all of that. And once again, it sounds complicated, but it's easy to pull off. And it's definitely the best thing about the game is that it has lots of things going on, but it's still not overwhelmingly complicated. You can easily just jump in the game, and that's what makes it so amazingly fluid and such a beautiful experience all around. The final new system in the game is also known as the CQC, the Close Quarter Combat. And with the CQC, it's a much more involved and integrated way of actually dealing with the enemies. You can knock them out like before, you can hold them hostage like before, but now you can also use knife and gun combo, where you can hold a person with a knife and use the gun to take other people out. You can also use the knife to threaten them and interrogate them for information. Sometimes this will be useless, they'll just struggle against you, but other times it can even give you unlock codes to open new doors, or it can also point out hidden areas that you might not have been able to find before. And as a system, it's one of those things that, again, actually this time this system looks incredibly simple, not much to it, but really using it more and more becomes much more of a fun part of how can you really sneak up to someone, grab them, interrogate them, and basically finish them off, kill them, and without still attracting any attention from anybody else in the meantime. As a whole, the game is so much more whole and so much more fulfilling. There's a lot more chances to actually just play the game. There are many complaints about Metal Gear Solid 2, and to be honest, one is that there are so many times where you're just watching movies and you're just codec after codec after codec, but this time around the game just goes. There's a big intro to the game, And there's a lot of movies up front, but then actually there's a huge stretch of just fighting, just like going through different situations, and that's where the game really just shows itself off very well. You know, I finished in just over 20 hours, but I give a good estimate of the game, 20 to 25 hours, and all of it was very, very fun. There were very few stretches where I was wondering what the hell I'm going to be doing, and to be honest, there's still some issues about where like the camera is, because some of the grass will force a first-person perspective, and you still can't move around in first-person view. But those problems are pretty much overwhelmed by the massive quality of like everything else that's going on in the game. This is definitely a contender for Game of the Year. This is definitely one of the best games that we've seen on the PS2, and this is definitely, I would say, the best game in the series.
Snake is in for another richly cinematic, occasionally convoluted, but ultimately satisfying adventure in Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. It's been several years since the last Metal Gear Solid game, and in many ways, much has changed, but in other ways, the series hasn't changed much at all. This is still a game that puts a very, very heavy emphasis on storytelling, often at the expense of gameplay. During the first several hours of the game, you barely even play it at all. You're just listening to a lot of exposition that's actually rather slow. So if you're new to the series, this game probably won't sell you on the whole Metal Gear Solid 3 thing. You'll probably feel like fans of this series, of which there are legion, are kind of crazy, because what do they see in something like this? But Metal Gear Solid fans know what the secret is. It's that these games always have some sort of really crazy story and some really impressive twists and unique cinematic moments that really make the whole experience worthwhile. And Metal Gear Solid 3 does all this. It features a great story, one that's probably a lot better than that of MGS2. It introduces some really cool new characters and has some spectacular boss battles. Some of the boss battles in MGS3 are the best that have ever occurred in the series yet. The game's mechanics actually haven't changed much since Metal Gear Solid 2, and they've aged noticeably during these past few years, just because they do some weird stuff with the camera, and you can look around from the first-person perspective, but you can't move, and a lot of the buttons have pressure-sensitive functions, so, you know, whether you take a guard hostage or slit his throat all depends on how hard you push down the square button and stuff like that. But it really, once again, gives you a whole variety of different moves that you can do and some interesting stuff that you can pull off. All this stuff is cool, but you also don't ever really come to a point where you need to use it. Generally, you're just trying to stay hidden from enemy guards, and even if they do spot you, it's pretty easy just to mow them down and then find a quiet spot where you can wait until the alert stands down. And then you get into the game's boss battles, where it really does encourage you to experiment and to think, though you can always just call your commanding officer on your radio and he'll offer some friendly advice. So the action and the stealth really comes to a head at these points, and they're the game's strongest moments from a gameplay standpoint. As previously suggested, though, MGS3 takes a while to hit its stride. Part of the reason it just can take a while to get into is that the game sports this weirdly kind of absurdist, self-aware and self-deprecating sense of humor that's going to be like good for a lot of nudging and winking laughs for hardcore fans of the series, but if you're new to this series, you're just going to be bewildered at the weird in-jokes and things like that. But ultimately, it's fortunate that the humor seems to fall by the wayside at about the halfway point of the game, and the story basically gets serious and takes place in the wake of the Cuban Missile Crisis during the 60s. And without spoiling anything, it basically revolves around Snake trying to rescue this brilliant Russian weapons specialist. But of course, things get a lot more complicated and more characters are introduced, such as the villainous Colonel Volgin, who's this Russian madman, and his various cohorts, including the Cobras, who are this elite commando unit who comprise many of the game's boss battles. The game's best characters, though, not including Snake, are the boss, who is the Snake's mentor, and also Ocelot, who fans of MGS will remember as the crazy, eccentric Russian gunslinger. So these characters display a level of depth to their personas that's uncommon in other games. They're really quite interesting. So if you bear with it and you're an MGS fan, you're really going to get into this story and will probably really grow to like the boss as well as Ocelot and Snake as characters. One of the obvious differences between MGS3 and its predecessors is that this game takes place in a lot of natural environments and not just in the claustrophobic corridors that have been the hallmark of the series. When you're out in the jungle, you have to do such things as stalk through the dense overgrowth and really hunt people because you no longer have your fancy radar to rely on. The game also introduces a camouflage system to let you stay hidden better. Basically, all you do is you access a menu and switch between different uniforms and face paints, and this makes you more or less hidden depending on the type of environment. You could get to a point where you're basically completely invisible if you're lying prone, and this lets you set up for some cool close quarters combat action where you can sneak up on a guy and put him in a vice grip or stab him and all kinds of nasty stuff like that. Should you yourself get hurt, there's now this new curing system for treating serious injuries like gunshot wounds and burns and stuff like that. This too is pretty abstract. You just go into a menu and use a few kind of bandages and sewing kits and stuff like that, and you're good as new. You could even do this in the middle of a boss fight. The other new system in the game is the necessity of having to eat to regain stamina. Soon enough, you're going to be carrying basically a whole zoo in your backpack of all the little animals that you've either tranquilized or stabbed or something like that. And as soon as your stamina meter runs low, you go into the menu and you eat one, and that's pretty much all there is to it. All in all, though, this game's gameplay is tried and true. If you're familiar with the gameplay of MGS2, you can expect a sort of a similar experience here, especially if you've gotten to playing MGS2 without the radar on. In addition to the main story mode, though, there's also the Snake versus Monkey mode, which is suitable for all ages insofar as you don't kill anybody, but instead you knock out ape escape monkeys and you capture them. It's actually pretty fun and a good way to practice some of the mechanics of the game. MGS3's presentation is superb once again. The graphics are really impressive, and some of the in-engine cutscenes are especially so. The character models on display here are some of the best in the business, even though the lip syncing isn't that great, but all in all, this is one of the best looking PS2 games available. The audio is another highlight of MGS3 and is basically impeccable. There are actually some kind of spotty voice performances, but they're definitely of the caliber of previous Metal Gear Solid games, but the ambient sound, and especially the soundtrack, is just really impressive. Metal Gear Solid has always aspired to be more than just an action-adventure game. It's always had these sort of postmodern storytelling elements, and it's always tried to do more than the average game and really tried to push the envelope as far as what could be done with the whole game medium. And if you've enjoyed these elements of the previous games, then you'll find them once again in MGS3, which has these moments that in and of themselves are worth the price of admission. With all that said, I ultimately think that Metal Gear Solid 3 isn't going to change anyone's mind about this series. If you love it, you're going to continue to love it. You're going to really enjoy this story, and that's the side of the camp that I happen to be on. If you don't love it, if you think it's just way convoluted and crazy, then the game is going to push you away the same as the previous installments have. But you know what? That's okay. This game knows its audience. It's well established with its crowd, and that crowd is really going to enjoy what this game has to offer.
Hallo liebe GamePro-Leser und herzlich willkommen zu unserem Mega-Video zu Metal Gear Solid 3. In Metal Gear 3 geht es, Achtung Überraschung, um einen Panzer, der als Abschussbasis für russische Nuklearraketen dienen soll. Das Ungetüm mit dem Namen Shegohod ist jedoch noch nicht fertiggestellt, sodass die Russen hinter dessen Erbauer Sokolov her sind. Dieser weilte zwar im Exil in den USA, wurde aber als Gegenleistung für das glimpfliche Ende der Kuba-Krise im Jahr 62 an die Russen ausgeliefert. Da so ein Mann aber nicht in den Händen des Feindes bleiben darf, muss ihn jemand in einer geheimen Mission in die USA zurückholen. Und da kommt eigentlich nur einer in Frage. Ihr schlagt euch nun mit einem Agenten durch den Dschungel, der auf den Namen Snake hört, aller Voraussicht nach aber der berühmte Big Boss ist. Denn Solid Snake kann zu Beginn der 60er Jahre eigentlich noch gar nicht existieren. Eine letzte Garantie für diese Theorien gibt es aber nicht. Ein bisschen Spannung muss ja auch sein.
You're already in enemy territory and somebody might be listening in.
Um möglichst problemlos an sein Ziel zu kommen, bleibt Snake am besten unerkannt. Dazu muss er sich nicht nur leise und behutsam bewegen, sondern auch seine Tarnung aufrechterhalten. Diese wird durch den sogenannten Tarnungsindex rechts oben auf dem Bildschirm angezeigt. Jetzt wechseln wir seine Kleidung, um die Tarnung im hohen Gras zu verbessern. Die Menüführung geht dabei einfach und fix von der Hand. Durch diesen schnellen Kleiderwechsel haben wir Snakes Wert auf 90% gesteigert, sodass er beinahe unsichtbar ist. Doch da im Hintergrund eine Wache auftaucht, die auch noch schwer bewaffnet ist, nehmen wir den sicheren Umweg durch den Baumstamm. Für eine bessere Übersicht kann man in Metal Gear 3 die Kamera ein wenig nachjustieren. Hier verschaffen wir uns mit dem rechten Stick einen kurzen Überblick. Die Wache ist offenbar weit genug weg, also krabbeln wir durch den Stamm. Dabei sammeln wir ein Insektenspray auf, denn man weiß ja nie, wozu man sowas vielleicht noch brauchen kann. In den Zwischenszenen gibt es einen besonderen Kniff. Wird rechts oben die R1-Taste eingeblendet, könnt ihr auf Knopfdruck durch Snakes Augen sehen. Hier macht der Agent eine besondere Entdeckung. An manchen Wachen kommt man in Metal Gear 3 nur schwer vorbei. Deshalb schaltet man sie am besten gleich aus. In dieser Szene probieren wir es mal mit einem kleinen Trick. In der vorangegangenen Sequenz hat Snake ein Wespennest entdeckt. Das kommt uns gerade recht. Wir gehen in Position, warten ab, bis die beiden Wachen unter dem Nest stehen und geben dann einen gezielten Schuss mit der Betäubungspistole ab. Das war immerhin ein Teilerfolg, denn eine der beiden Wachen hat sich schon aus dem Staub gemacht. Die andere ziehen wir jetzt etwas konventioneller aus dem Verkehr. Wir robben durch das Gras und gehen wieder in Position. Dann zücken wir erneut unsere Betäubungspistole und nehmen den Gegner auf der Brücke ins Visier. Mit dieser Waffe versetzen wir den Gegner nur für ein paar Minuten in tiefen Schlaf. Das sollte aber locker reichen, um die Brücke zu überqueren. In Metal Gear 3 muss man sich nicht nur mit aufmerksamen Wachen, sondern auch der Flora und Fauna und anderen Fallen herumschlagen. Zuerst einmal muss Snake unter Wasser den riesigen Krokodilen ausweichen. Naja, und dann stellt sich die Frage, was man sich alles so einfängt, wenn man durch solch einen Tümpel wie diesen hier wartet. Na? Richtig. Fiese, fette, matschige Blutegel. In solch einem Moment kommt das Erste-Hilfe-Menü zum Einsatz. Snake hat allerlei Verbandszeug dabei, mit dem er Verletzungen heilen kann. Aber wie wird man Blutegel los? Am besten mit einer dicken Zigarre. Snake wird euch demonstrieren, wie das funktioniert. Neben Blutegeln und Krokodilen gibt es aber noch andere Gefahren. Manche Wachposten haben zum Beispiel Fallen aufgestellt. Diesen einfachen Stolperdraht haben wir jedoch schnell durchschaut und das Ganze wird natürlich entschärft. Ein gut gezielter Schuss mit der Pistole und die Sache ist gegessen. Apropos gegessen, was ist das da oben? Früchte. Mit einem gut gezielten Schuss holen wir ein bisschen Obst vom Baum. Die Nahrungsaufnahme ist in Metal Gear 3 sehr wichtig, da ihr so eure Ausdauer wieder auffüllt. Außerdem macht ein laut knurrender Magen schon mal die eine oder andere Wache aufmerksam. Und das kann natürlich sehr unangenehm werden. Für Abwechslung ist ebenfalls gesorgt, denn natürlich seid ihr in Metal Gear 3 nicht nur in der freien Natur unterwegs. Hier haben wir uns zum Beispiel in ein Labor geschlichen. Leider sind wir trotz Kittel aufgeflogen, denn wir haben vergessen, unsere Maske aufzusetzen. Das nützt nachträglich auch nichts mehr. Dann wählen wir eben die harte Tour und machen uns den Weg mit unseren Fäusten frei. Die harte Tour ist in Metal Gear 3 übrigens gar nicht so selten gefordert, denn es kommt häufiger zu offenen Konfrontationen. In dieser Szene müssen wir zum Beispiel alle 8 Feinde ausschalten, um weiterzukommen. Ob wir sie dafür um die Ecke bringen oder lediglich ausnocken, ist jedoch ganz unsere Sache. Dieser Knilch wird erstmal mit einer Betäubungsgranate versorgt. In den Gefechten kommt dann auch gerne mal größeres Kaliber zum Einsatz, wie ihr in dieser Situation sehen könnt. Die dicksten Brocken sind jedoch wie eigentlich immer die Endgegner.
We are the sons of the boss!
Hier nehmen wir es mit The Pain auf. Der Mann mit dem Faible für Schmerzen und Wespen ist ein Mitglied der legendären Cobra Unit. Falls ihr wissen wollt, was es mit dieser Truppe von Superschurken auf sich hat, empfehle ich euch die Lektüre des Metal Gear Artikels im Heft. Ich hoffe, unser kleiner Trip nach Russland hat euch gefallen. Jetzt wünsche ich euch noch viel Spaß mit den letzten bewegten Bildern von Metal Gear 3.
Let's get started.